husband got a $340,000 bonus in October, and by November he was asking me to split the cost of his company's holiday dinner party. Not suggesting, not joking, asking. With a spreadsheet. I remember standing in the kitchen when he told me. I had flour on my apron from testing a pie crust recipe. I was already thinking ahead to the holidays, already mentally running through table settings and grocery lists, and he slid his laptop across the counter like he was presenting a quarterly report. I broke down the projected costs, he said. If we split it evenly, it comes out to about $1,800 each. I looked at the screen. He had itemized everything: venue rental, catering deposit, floral arrangements, bar tab estimate. My name was literally in a column next to his, with a dollar amount beside it. I said, "This is your work event." He said, "It's our household. We share expenses." I put down the rolling pin, very carefully. We had been married for 6 years. I was 31, my husband. I'll call him by what he was to me then. My partner, the person I thought I knew completely, was 38. He worked in corporate finance. I had left a full-time marketing job 3 years earlier to freelance, partly because his schedule was unpredictable and someone needed to be the one who could pivot. I made decent money, not his money, but decent. The arrangement, when we first moved in together, had been simple enough. We split household bills, groceries, utilities, mortgage on the condo we bought together. Personal expenses stayed personal. That was the rule. His work dinners, his dry cleaning, his golf weekends, his. My gym membership, my client lunches, my flights to see my sister, mine. It worked. For a long time it worked. What had quietly shifted, without either of us naming it, was the scope of what counted as household. His company held a holiday party every December. For the first 2 years, it was at a restaurant downtown, and his firm covered the whole tab. Then they switched to a rotating system. Senior staff could host or organize their own events and get partial reimbursement. My husband had volunteered to host, without asking me, and then come home and told me I would be helping plan it. The first year, I didn't think much of it. I found a venue, handled the RSVPs, coordinated with a caterer, made a seating chart, bought centerpieces, stayed up until 1 a.m. addressing cards. His colleagues told him he had a very capable wife. He smiled and said he knew. The second year, I did the same. More people. Fancier venue. His boss's wife commented on the floral arrangements. My husband passed along the compliment the next morning, over coffee like a gift. The third year was this year. Except this year, he had just closed a deal that earned him a $340,000 performance bonus. I knew about it because he had called me from the office, voice pitched with the particular excitement he reserved for large numbers. I had genuinely celebrated with him. I ordered his favorite takeout, opened a bottle of champagne we had been saving, stayed up late listening to him talk about the deal. 3 weeks later, he showed me the spreadsheet. I did not flip the table. I did not cry. I looked at the number next to my name, $1,800, and I said, "Let me think about it." He seemed surprised I didn't just agree. He said, "It's not that much. You know how important this event is." I said, "I know." I spent the next 3 days thinking, not about whether to be angry, I was already past that, but about what to do with the anger. Because here was the thing I kept coming back to. He had never once asked what my time cost. He had never looked at the 40 or 50 hours I spent planning these events and assigned them a dollar value. To him, that was just what happened. The venue got booked, the caterer got hired, the seating chart appeared, like magic, like it didn't come from somewhere. I called my friend, I'll call her my best friend, because that's what she was, and told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Have you ever invoiced him?" I said, "What?" She said, "You're a freelance marketer. You invoice clients for your time all the time. What's your hourly rate?" I said, $95. She said, "And how many hours did last year's party take?" I had never counted, but I started counting. I pulled up my email and went back through every thread related to the previous year's event. Venue research, 4 hours. Vendor calls, 6 hours. On-site walkthrough, 2 hours. Menu planning and dietary restriction coordination, 3 hours. Day of setup and management, 9 hours. Breakdown and follow-up, 2 hours. That was just last year. Just the hours I could document, 26 hours. At $95 an hour, I opened a new spreadsheet. I had been freelancing for 3 years. In that time, I had planned his company holiday party twice. I had organized 4 dinner parties for his clients at our home. I had coordinated 2 charity auction events he had sponsored. I had managed the logistics of a team retreat he hosted at a lake house we rented. I had handled every single piece of correspondence, every vendor, every timeline, every last-minute crisis. I started adding it up. Then I added the domestic labor. Because if we were really doing this, if we were really having the conversation about who paid for what, then we were going to have it completely. I found a report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on the replacement cost of unpaid household labor. Cooking, $15 to $25 an hour. Cleaning, $20 to $30. Grocery shopping and errands, $15 to $20. Laundry, home management, scheduling, variable. I was conservative. I used the low end of every range. I thought about the last 6 years. I thought about the meals I cooked 4 or 5 nights a week because he got home late and I was the one with the flexible schedule. I thought about the dry cleaning I picked up, the vet appointments I scheduled for the dog we got together, the contractor I managed when we redid the kitchen, the times I rearranged my own client deadlines because his schedule had changed and someone needed to be home. I did not inflate anything. I was methodical. I was precise. I used real numbers from real sources, and I only counted hours I could reasonably document or estimate. The total for 6 years came to just over $187,000. I formatted it like an invoice, line items, dates, hourly rates, subtotals. I used the same template I sent to my actual clients. At the top, where it said Bill 2, I typed his name. I printed 2 copies. The night before I was going to talk to him, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to him in the dark and thought about how much I had loved the early version of this marriage. How we had been good at being on the same team. When it had started to change, I honestly couldn't say. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe I had let it be gradual because it was easier than naming it. In the morning, I waited until he had his coffee. I sat down across from him at the kitchen table and I put the invoice in front of him. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "What is this?" I said, "You sent me a spreadsheet." "I made one too." He said, This isn't serious." I said, "My rate is $95 an hour. That's what my clients pay. I've been giving you a 6-year discount." He pushed the paper back toward me. He said, "This is our marriage. You can't invoice your own husband." I said, "You can't ask your own wife to pay for your work party." He stared at me. I stared back. He said, "That is completely different." I said, "Tell me how." He didn't. What followed was 2 weeks of a particular kind of silence. Not the cold, punishing silence of an active fight. More like the silence of 2 people who have both said something true and can't pretend it wasn't said. He paid for the holiday party himself. He didn't mention my invoice again. I didn't push it. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. In January, he brought up the idea of a post-nuptial agreement. He said he thought it would help clarify expectations. I said I thought what we actually needed was a direct conversation about what our expectations already were. He said he didn't see why this had to be so complicated. I said, "It's only complicated if you think what I've been doing doesn't count as something." He said, "I appreciate what you do." I said, "Appreciation isn't the same as acknowledgement." He said he needed some space to think. He stayed at his brother's apartment for a week. I did not chase him. I went to see my family. I sat with my mother in her kitchen in Ohio and told her everything, and she listened, and then she said very quietly, "You already know what you need to do." I did know. I think I had known for a while. When he came back, we sat down and had the kind of conversation that ends things. Not loud, not dramatic. Very calm and very final. He said he thought we wanted different things. I said I thought we had wanted the same things and just told ourselves different stories about how to get there. He said he was sorry. I said I was too. We hired separate attorneys. Mine was a woman who had been doing family law in the city for 20 years. She had a way of asking questions that made you feel like she had heard everything and nothing could surprise her. When I showed her my invoice, she smiled, not unkindly. She said, This is very organized. My husband's attorney wanted to settle quickly. My attorney said we should not be in a hurry. We were in mediation for about 6 weeks. His position at the start was that our financial arrangement had always been clear and I was entitled only to the standard equitable distribution of marital assets, half the condo, half the joint savings account, and nothing beyond that. His bonus, per the terms of his employment contract, was classified as individual performance compensation. My attorney pointed to New York State's recognition of non-economic contributions in equitable distribution. She did not use my invoice as a legal document. She used it as a demonstration of context of a pattern of contribution that had real market value and had never been compensated. His attorney objected. My attorney said simply, "We'll let the process play out." What played out was this: my husband's own brother, who had been at every single one of those holiday parties, who had once told me after a particularly stressful event that I should charge people for my event management skills, agreed to provide a written statement about the scope of work I had consistently taken on. He did not do this to hurt his brother. I think he did it because he was honest and he had been in that room and he knew what he had seen. The final agreement gave me 40% of the equity in the condo, which had appreciated significantly. It gave me a lump sum that accounted for my reduced earning trajectory during the years I had been managing our household alongside my freelance work. It was not $187,000. It was not nothing. My attorney shook my hand on the last day and said, "You prepared well." That was in April. It's September now, and I have a one-bedroom apartment with good light and a kitchen I cook in when I feel like it. I have my clients, my billing software, my rate sheet that says $95 an hour. My best friend comes over on Sunday mornings, and we drink coffee and don't plan anybody else's party. I think about that spreadsheet sometimes. His, not mine. The one he slid across the counter like it was nothing, like it didn't mean anything beyond numbers in a column. I think about how confidently he had typed my name in that cell. And I think about how, for the first time in a long time, I decided to read what was written there and write something back. I still have both spreadsheets, his and mine. They sit in the same folder on my laptop, right next to each other, and sometimes I open them just to look. His was clean, confident. $1,800 next to my name, like it was obvious, like it had always been obvious. That's the part that stayed with me longest. Not the number, but the certainty behind it. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't wondered if it was fair. He had just typed my name in a cell and moved on. I think about what it took for me to do the same thing back. Not the math. The math was straightforward, almost easy once I started. What was hard was deciding that my time had a number at all, that the hours I had given year after year, quietly, without a word, were worth the same kind of column and row that he applied to everything else in his life. That decision, to count what I had done, to write it down, to hand it to him without apology, that wasn't something I arrived at easily. It required me to be honest in a way I had been avoiding, honest about what I had accepted, honest about why. Because the truth is, I had known for a while that the arrangement wasn't equal. I had known and I had let it continue because it felt smaller than the marriage, less important than keeping the peace. And that was my part in it. I owned that. What I've come to understand is that integrity, real integrity, the kind that holds up under pressure, isn't just about being honest with other people. It's about being honest with yourself first, about what you're worth, about what you're willing to trade away quietly and what you're not. I had spent 6 years trading away my time and calling it love. It was love partly, but it was also something I had never examined, and unexamined things have a way of building up until they become a number too large to ignore. The intelligence part came later, not the spreadsheets, that was just arithmetic, but the understanding that knowing your own value isn't arrogance, it's clarity. My attorney told me I had prepared well. What she meant was that I had paid attention, that I had been specific where it was easy to be vague, documented where it was easier to let things blur. Clarity had protected me in ways that emotion alone never could have. And the getting through it, the 6 weeks of mediation, the apartment search, the mornings when I sat with coffee I'd made for one, and tried to remember who I was before I'd reorganized my whole life around someone else's schedule, that was just endurance. One day after the next, not heroic, just steady. My best friend asks sometimes if I'm angry. I tell her not really. Not anymore. What I feel is closer to grateful. Not for the marriage ending, but for what I found out when it did. That I could count. That I could present what I had counted without flinching. That the version of me sitting across a mediation table with a printed invoice was someone I recognized, even if I hadn't seen her in a while. The apartment has good light in the mornings. I cook when I want to. I bill my clients on time, and they pay me, and nobody slides a spreadsheet across my counter anymore expecting me to just sign at the bottom. I think that's enough. I think that's exactly enough.